Well, good evening, this is Hound Dog Steve coming to you on the 14th of May. And are we looking at the dying embers of our civilization, of our political system? These are the last throes of a system that have outlived its usefulness? Well, those are interesting questions, and that is a topic of conversation this evening. Well, a warm welcome back to all of you who are returning to my channel, and a great shout out to any newcomers. Please sit down, get yourself a cup of tea and put your feet up, and let's have a discussion about this, because we would seem to be at another crossroads in our civilization. And of course there are certain milestones, as you can imagine, when the wheel was invented, when we discovered fire, when we could make fire, when we started making flint tools. Even the Romans, when they encountered the Middle East and the Arabic numbering system threw in a zero, to a system that only knew Roman numerals and had no concept of a zero. That was a bigger shift than you might think. The Gutenberg printing press, which wrestled out of the hands of the clergy the domination over the written word. And that in its turn led to the overthrow of the French government, because by the time we would reach 1700, these little things called novellas had been written. And they were mostly semi-pornographic, small stories about the lauded and the gentry and the royalty, and some of the debauched things that they used to get up to. And now this was about 1729, 1720, somewhere in there, and this led to a complete disrespect of the royalty. And so when the royalty called upon the people for their support and assistance and patience, because of course France was starving at the time, the people revolted. So these are not small events. Now the big event that has happened in my lifetime to the system, and it is a shock to the system, is the internet. And of course what the internet has done is allowed us to shrink time and space, and we can now communicate instantaneously with each other over great distances. And of course, because of YouTube videos, you can now see how people live in different parts of the world. And when you can do that, it is pretty difficult to do things like war, because you need that fear of people, of the alien other on the other side of the hill, to be able to generate that kind of animosity where people will pick up a gun and go and wage war against another country. But when you are seeing just ordinary everyday people from just about every country in the world making videos about things that they're doing, their life experiences, their day-to-day living experiences, things that they're making, their musical talents, their artistic exploits, it is absolutely unbelievable, just how diverse this world is. And of course this really does start to make us, and I hate to seem kind of hokey here, but this does seem to make us one kind of family. Now this is completely undermining the system that we have, because the government system that we have right now is essentially based on secrecy. It's based on need to know. It's based on the ability of one department to be able to keep secret from another department what it is doing. And of course this takes an exceedingly long time. It is incredibly counterproductive, and that was okay in the past, but as we have got the internet, we have been allowed to see some of the glaring inefficiencies in the way this system works. And of course some of the problems that are rising now, because this system has allowed, I should say, people to sweep really big problems under the carpet. It has allowed them to delay important decisions that should have made. It's allowed them to put off discussions with the public, which might have brought about some kind of understanding, some kind of unison, some kind of cooperation between everybody. But now, we can see that things aren't working very well at all. This crazy desire for secrecy that the government has is overwhelming just about everything. And so the internet is really playing havoc with our political systems, because again you can refer back to things that they said 2, 3 to when they were a child, to their yearbooks at school, and so on and so forth. And it's pretty hard to have an unblemished past. So this is really undermining the government, and you can see the cracks showing up even within the parties. The Conservative Party in England is well divided, with basically a revolution going on within its ranks. The Labour Party is doing the same thing. The Liberal Party in Canada has been ousting its own members because of dissension within the ranks, and cabinet members at that. And people are seeing the way that governments are responding to this, and of course it's not very pretty. And of course, if we flip over to Europe for a second, they have just brought in this copyright law, which is absolutely draconian. Now, there was no discussion about this. There was no public vote. There was no one from the public came forward and said, let's do this. This was basically brought into place by corporations and civil servants. But this is not the first example of basically the people's voice being completely ignored. And I think actions really do speak louder than words when we come down to this, because we can actually see how these people behave. And when I say these people, I'm talking about the EU now, and the EU is the model for North America. You can take that to the bank. You can see with the UN Agenda 21 and now Agenda 30 that there is a homogenization worldwide as we go to the unification of systems, the unification of banking, the unification of bureaucracy, the unification of rules and regulations, and so on and so forth through the UN. But like I say, if we look at some of the deals that have been made and broken in the past, the votes that have been forced to be retaken. In 1992, Denmark voted on the Maastricht Treaty, and they voted against it. They were forced to vote again. In Ireland in 2001, they voted on the Nice Treaty and they rejected that. They were forced to vote again. And again in 2008, Ireland had to vote on the Lisbon Treaty. They rejected that. They were forced to vote again. The French voted against the EU constitution. Well, they were just ignored. The Netherlands did the same thing. They were just ignored. And with Brexit, British and EU bureaucrats have done absolutely everything in their power to throw roadblocks in the way of this taking place. And now, interestingly enough, we've had a situation where an election took place in, well, let's flip over to a little video and I'll let Nigel Farage explain what happened, because it really is quite bizarre.
Mayoral election in Istanbul a couple of weeks ago, in which Erdogan, the Turkish leader's candidate, did not win. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to rerun the election. And guess what everyone's saying? The Foreign Office are saying it's an outrage to ask people to vote again. Mr. Juncker said, which goes to show they must have caught him before lunch. But Juncker says it's an outrage. Guy Verhofstadt says it's an outrage. And yet they're all happy because they did it with the Danes over the Maastricht Treaty. They told them to vote again. They did it twice with the Irish and told them to vote again. And they all think that we should vote again. Well, let me tell you something. It would be an outrage to have a second referendum on the same question if we hadn't first implemented the result. But
yes, so that was very interesting that all of a sudden we get this double standard, where the EU is now decrying the fact that a second vote is taking place. Anyway, let's just go over to a couple of articles I've got here which will highlight a few things, and then we'll come back and I will do a quick wrap-up. Okay, here we go. So here we are from Unheard. Are these the last gasps of our old political order? It was another bleak week in the history of the Conservative Party. At the local elections, the governing party suffered its worst result for nearly a quarter century. It shared more than 1,300 council seats and, compared with last year, saw its share of the vote fall by 6 points. The Conservatives walk away with a national equivalent vote of just 28%. To put this in perspective, if it were replicated at a general election, it would be a lower share of the vote than what Michael Howard presided over in 2005 and a lower share of the vote than what John Major presided over in 1997. It would be the party's lowest vote in history. Ever since the vote for Brexit, the party has been polling stronger in pro-Brexit areas among working class voters and in communities where there are larger numbers of voters without degrees. They have been steadily losing territory, though, in economically secure, middle-class and pro-Remain areas where there are larger concentrations of graduates and social liberals. This tension was less of a risk when it looked as though the Conservative Party would deliver on Brexit and lead Britain out of the EU. Having done so, the party and a new leader could have run the country with a radically revamped domestic policy agenda with as much for Remainers as Leavers. But as we know, things didn't quite turn out that way. With Theresa May having failed so far to deliver any sort of Brexit, the Conservative Party is getting hit on all sides. The biggest setbacks were in Remain areas, and among the voters, the most important were not the 18 to 24-year-olds that are generally obsessed over, but the slightly older 30 and 40-somethings who swung hardest against them in 2017. The perfect storm that is approaching the Conservative Party is going to cause significant damage on all sides. The middle-class Remainers who are still in the party will finally jump ship or abstain, while Brexiteers will drift over to the Brexit Party or similarly decide that turning out to cast a vote in the next election is not worth it. Nor did Labour fare particularly well at the polls. Whilst Corbyn and his party did make some gains, their overall tally compared with 2015 was a net loss of 82 seats. An unwritten law at local elections is that the main party of opposition is supposed to enjoy gains, not suffer losses. Nor is it supposed to suffer losses in its heartlands. That, though, is precisely what happened. British politics has been pushed into a state of partial realignment, with voters facing cross-cutting pressures and our political parties facing deeply divided electorates. Whether the Conservatives and whoever succeeds Theresa May can win voters back and build a new coalition remains to be seen. Likewise, whether Jeremy Corbyn and Labour can cobble together a viable coalition for majority power is unknown. It's entirely possible that the future holds a full-blown realignment. For now, though, the only thing we can be certain of is that the fragmentation that has been working through our political system is set to continue, and as the old order struggles to cope, new challenges would take advantage of that volatility. And this from the Daily Mail. It was a mistake not to interfere. Juncker says the EU should have got involved in the 2016 Brexit referendum campaign to destroy the lies spread by Leavers and blames David Cameron for telling him to stay out of it. So you would have readily interfered in someone else's legal, democratic referendum or election? And this, my friends, just goes to show you where the EU is coming from, and that the globalists care naught for you, your families, your children, your lives. Right there in black and white. If they don't like the answer, they will interfere. So I think you can see why people are really getting quite tired of the old political order. And, you know, when you start adding all of these things together, you can only play this game for so long. It's like the little boy that cried wolf. You know, every time you force people to vote again, you're saying, I don't trust your vote, or we know better than you do, and you don't mean anything. Basically, you're being disenfranchised by the whole system. And so I don't care how many times they say that we're living in a democracy and that they are working for us, when you can see quite clearly by their actions that they're working for themselves. And we have got nothing to do with it. We basically have to eke out a living, one way or another, in whatever crumbs fall off the wagon of this bureaucracy. And this is not going to get better. This is actually going to get more and more intense as these people basically cover more and more territory, gain control of more and more territory. And I'm sure that many of you who are having a brush with government are noticing how impenetrable it has become. Once a decision has been made, and of course all the decision-making process is usually at committee during working hours when people can't attend, so it's essentially in secret, although technically it is open to the public. And so of course once it goes through committee, it gets recommended to council, and council are ready to pass it. It's very, very, very difficult to stop any kind of legislation at that level, and that would be whether it's at the province or the federal level as well. And people are just getting tired of the disenfranchisement. You can only basically do that for so long before you start getting serious pushback, and now with only really one option, what you're seeing is a pushback on the populist side of things. And here in Canada, certainly, we are all Conservative governments now across Canada, except for one province, which is British Columbia, and all of the female premiers have now been elected out of office. We have a populist president south of the border here, also in South America. Most of Europe now is turning populist. Brexit is gaining grounds like crazy in England. So you're seeing this real pushback. So we can expect a lot more of this in the future until there's some kind of reconciliation between the left and the right, and we move back somewhere to where we were, which is a far more centrist kind of position, which is basically fiscal responsibility but open to new ideas. And I think that most people would agree that that's a sensible and prudent way forward for families, households, businesses and governments. Okay, well, if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment and subscribe below. And in the meantime, this is Hound Dog Steve signing off, wishing you a very great evening, and we will talk to you very, very shortly. You take care now. See ya. Bye.